Good afternoon. This is the Torah and Parashat Shemini, the first Parsha after Pesach. And this Parsha is interesting enough divided into two sections. The first one is dealing with the dedication of the Mishkan on the eighth day. Hashem approved the Mishkan, approved the Aaron and his son's offering, initial offerings that were commanded by Moshe. Then and the holy flame came down and consumed the korban. Then, unfortunately, there was a tragic incident of Nadav and Avihu, who offered a strange alien fire, a Ketoris incense, and Hashem killed both of them. Now, I'm going to come back to that incident, which is a very famous incident. However, I want to look, there is a dichotomy in the Parsha. It deals with that first, approximately slightly under half. The rest of the Parsha deals with kosher, which animals we can eat, which fish, which creatures, and other laws of kashrut, keeping kosher. Now, one of the explanations that's given is, why do you have this dichotomy? And one of the explanations is that as a higher level as Nadav and Avihu were, their problem was they were so concentrating on the spiritual, they did not focus more on this world. They were more focused to the next world, which led them to do what they did. And they were in some kind of very spiritual, maybe even ecstasy level. But as the whole thing about kashrut shows, we must serve Hashem in this world also. And one of the basic things one has to do in this world is eat, and showing how one does that. What is the appropriate way to eat? And that is the first thing I'd like to raise. Second thing is, in terms of spirituality, even though we're supposed to be spiritual and reach out to Hashem, we still have to live in this world. And neither Nadav and Avihu, unlike the brothers, they did not have wives, which is not the way of all the Tanaim and Amoraim, right? As the mission in the Gemara, only one did not have a wife. And that is not the ideal. That is not the ideal way to be. And in fact, one does not one again has to live in this world, be part of this world, and have children, none of which they did. Now, that doesn't mean they weren't at an extremely high level, as I will point out in a minute. But there's two bases of why they were punished. First one is, and I'm going to be basing this on Midrashim in New York Times. First one is that they should have been punished at Sinai, the day the Torah was received, and Hashem didn't do that. Now I'm going to explain some reasons why. First of all, what did they do? First of all, they went up with Moshe, Aaron, and the elders as a Canaan. They shouldn't have gone up, even as great as they were not at that level. Also, Hashem did not want to mar the Torah, and therefore was attached to something else. Now, it compares this to a king by a Midrash by Rabbah, a king celebrating his daughter's wedding. The scandalous act is committed by a member of the bridal party. The king waits until after the wedding to punish him. with them, not disrupt the happiness of the day. Matan Torah is his daughter's wedding. Jewish people in the Mishkan is the joy of his heart. Now, what was the nature of their sin? They went up and they gazed inappropriately at the Shekhinah. Well, the same with Moshe and Aaron. There's others that suggest they were showing certain arrogance and wanted to take over the leadership. Also, we could say that it was decreed, the final decree, but the actual execution was deferred. Fourth one is Aaron's merit. Some say that his merit, approval at the moment, prevented the punishment from falling immediately, so why not later? Because after that, even there was still an element of the sin of the Egel Sahav. As it is explained in Midrashim and the Horochaim's commentary, among other sources. Now, why would they punish later? The foreign fire, and use the regular fire where it's supposed to be, or the offering. That's what triggered the suspended sentence, so to speak. It was an intense love for Hashem, but it was not authorized. Hashem gave very precise things, how things were in the Mishkan. We see it in Parshas Vayera, Parshas Sav, and that was emphasized many times over. And that is part of it. Now, in Parshas what did they do it? What was wrong with them gazing at Hashem's vision? Chaim explains undue familiarity. And they were in a lighted atmosphere, eating and drinking before Hashem's presence. They were before Hashem's presence and eating and drinking, which they were criticized for. Now, that was a problem. And we see, and this is going to apply even to the other reason, when somebody is close to Hashem as they were, and they were very high level Hashems, the souls, one has to act appropriately and seriously. We see this at the beginning of the second Parshas of the Sefer Shmos, because Moshe at the end of Parshas Shmos says, hey, God, why did you send me? You just made matters worse. Because Pharaoh increased the work on slavery, Jewish people. And Hashem, even though Moshe was the closest prophet ever, there was none like him before or since, Jim rebuked him for getting a little too familiar and a little too close. Moshe, even somebody at Moshe's level, should not ask that question. And you see a parallel thing here. Now, Moshe's offense wasn't as serious as this, but it still showed a certain lack of respect. This is why it explains that we must do the mitzvahs. Not only, there's two levels, from Yira and Ahava. The higher level is to do the mitzvahs because you want to be close to Hashem. He's given us all these mitzvahs, and you want to show him, and you want to do it out of love. However, even an elevated person must still have a yira. Why does the yira needed? Fear of punishment, and because we must maintain a respectful distance from Hashem that applies to every one of us. And we see the principle operating here. Now, that's one explanation. The second explanation, which shows the greatness of Nadav and Abihu, And Moshe said to Aaron, this is what Hashem spoke to me. I will be sanctified through those who nearest. Thus I will be honored before the entire people. And Aaron was silent. And he will Yomer Moshe al Aaron, Shedaber Hashem Likrev Kedish, Al Pnei Kol Am, Yakaved Yadom Aaron. And Aaron was silent. Right? They said the fact that he and his sons were isolated in the Mishkan for the 7 days of the dedication was in a way not of a veilus, but the person said shiva. It wasn't a shiva, but it was a separation and isolation from people. And that's one explanation. Now, Aaron thought that he had done some great sin, and it says those close to him were saying Moshe thought it would be Nadav and Avi, thought it would be Moshe or Aaron, mentioned one person. Instead, it was two here. How can you have two people? And the explanation that is given is one is honorable me. Why? Shem said for what told him the Mishpan will be dedicated through somebody close to him. Moshe thought it was only one. I thought it would be through you or me. And so he understood what Hashem meant. The intention was not that Hashem first would be sanctified and then explain how it would occur. Rather, Moshe's intention was, through those nearest to me, I will be sanctified. In other words, learning Luther, death righteous, Vanu foreign people. In other words, they showed that they would keep, and they had to keep a proper distance. They still had the main covenant of Hashem. And that leaves one question, many questions, well, a number of questions. What I'm going to address is if that is in fact, the case, then how, one through one, how did both Nadav and Avihu die? And the answer is given that each one of them was a half of Neshama only. The two were together, were combined, were in the single Neshama. Now, even though they died at that point, this whole explanation of what that means exactly, why they died, how they died. Nadav and Avihu was still present in the camp of the Jewish people. And when did he come to the fore? In Sefer Bamidbar, Parashat Pinchas, and actually the end of the previous Parashat, Parashat Halach, going into Parashat Pinchas, when Zimri, a prince of the tribe of Shimon, Cosby, a high-level member of the aristocracy and the Midianites, Pinchas killed him and stopped the plague. However, Hashem's command through Moshe. However, when he saw that the whole tribe was against him, his neshama started to leave his body. It was only with the added koach, strength of Nadav and Avihu's neshamas, was he able to do that. And the question is, well, how can two neshamas go into one person? First of all, there's a number of explanations. What I'm going to go with here from the person with what we said is that there were really one neshama, and eventually Pinchas evolves into Eliel and Avi, and I will speak about that in much more detail when we get to Parshas Pinchas. May everybody have a good Shabbat and Shabbat Shalom as we are getting back into the post-Pesach period and into the Lomer on the way to receiving the Torah at Sinai. I'd like to wish everybody good Shabbos and Shabbat Shalom.